If you saw a man like this, what would you do? An old man quietly sitting at the base of a wall, his old phone plugged into a public outlet. He looks like a homeless person just trying to survive the day. But what if I told you he was once one of America's most legendary snipers? Why would a U.S. Admiral walk into a courtroom just to apologize to him in front of everyone? And what made the entire courtroom stand in stunned silence? All right, my dear audience, get ready for a story that'll leave you speechless. Take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. And drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone joining us from all corners of the world. They called him Red, a name no one remembers the origin of. It just fit. No one knew his real name. No one bothered to ask. He lived apart, almost off the map, in a one-room shack by a gravel road near Lake Oconee. No electricity, no house number, no visitors. An old pickup truck parked crookedly by a broken fence. On the porch, a rocking chair always tilted to one side, as if waiting for someone long gone. Inside the shed, old tools piled high, dusty and rusted, yet waiting for a knowing hand to bring them back to life. Red wasn't the smiling type, nor was he unapproachable. He was like a shadow passing through others' lives, leaving no trace. In town, some thought he was a veteran, perhaps scarred by something so harsh he no longer wanted to live among people. Others just saw him as an odd old man. No smartphone, no Wi-Fi, no patience for strangers. The truth? Red served 28 years in the U.S. Navy. 15 of those. He was a sniper with SEAL Team 4, a unit that operated in silence. No records, no reports, no public medals. Missions no one knew about marked his spine, his shoulders, his knees, and deeper still, his eyes. Every time Red fell silent, it was as if a piece of memory was locked away, untouchable. He didn't seek welcomes, didn't need to be called a hero, didn't expect understanding. He just wanted to live out his days as he had before, quietly, precisely, unyieldingly. Day after day, he worked alone in his shed. Broken machines came in, then vanished a few days later, running smoothly as if never flawed. Sometimes an old radio, sometimes a chainsaw, or a wheel, sometimes a prosthetic leg, the only thing letting another veteran get out of bed without calling for help. They weren't customers. They were people who understood his silence. They paid with a few cans of food, a bundle of dry wood, or just a nod. Red never asked for more. Though isolated, he wasn't fully cut off from the world. In his pocket, he carried something nearly extinct, a flip phone, taped together, its plastic casing chipped, its screen cloudy, no internet, no browsing. The flashlight was what he used most. When someone needed him, they knew how to reach him, not by signal, but by patience. Because a man like Red didn't live to be seen. He existed to hold on to what the world forgot. Once, a young man asked, "Why do you live like this?" Red didn't answer. He paused mid-wipe on an old rifle scope, his eyes drifting somewhere else. Then he resumed work, as if no question had been asked. Some might call it evasion, but really, that was the answer. In that small shack, nothing was wasted, nothing was thrown away. Every item, every rust stain, every clink of metal carried a piece of memory. To Red, memories weren't for telling, they were for keeping, and sometimes for piecing together the fractured lives out there, in every machine, every prosthetic arm, every flickering coil of wire. No one knew how he got by. No one asked. because he never complained, never asked for help, never lacked anything. For him, that was enough. They called him a ghost by the lake. But the truth, he wasn't a ghost. He was living proof of something very real, a piece of a nation many had forgotten. And sometimes, it's people like that, nameless, faceless, needing no remembrance, who keep the world standing, even as they choose to fade into silence. It all began on a Wednesday, like any other Wednesday. Red drove his old pickup into town, needing a few things, some welding rods, a carburetor kit for a neighbor's lawnmower that had just been dropped off. Nothing urgent, nothing that mattered to the rest of the world. But for him, every trip to town was a commitment, to himself, to others, to the silence he'd lived by for years. After paying in cash, he left the hardware store. No rush. He never rushed. On the brick wall beside the shop was an old outlet, usually used for Christmas lights each holiday season. That day, it was charging Red's flip phone, the one that had died the night before. He needed it that evening. A veteran in the next county, confined to a wheelchair after an IED blast, was waiting for his call. They'd set a time, not to chat, but to fix an old breathing machine the man couldn't afford to replace. That was why he needed the battery. Red sat down, leaning against the wall, his back always tilted slightly left because his spine had shifted from years of carrying heavy packs through jungles. His hands trembled faintly, but still held steady as he plugged in the charger. The phone flickered with a weak glow, its cracked screen like the scars on his body. 10 minutes. That's all he needed, 10 minutes to regain a connection. But for some, 10 minutes was too much. The store manager stepped out, mid-30s, small frame but a loud voice, holding a clipboard like a self-awarded medal. His eyes landed on Red, not hiding his irritation. To him, Red was just an old man with a scruffy beard, hunched back, sitting against his shop's wall. Not a customer, not anyone important, just an inconvenience in a peaceful morning. The manager didn't ask why, didn't need to understand, just needed to keep the storefront clean, per store policy. He approached, his voice sharp but polite, like a paper cut. "Sir, please move along." Red didn't look up right away. He was watching the screen, 1% charged. Slowly, he raised his eyes, holding the phone up like a child showing a broken toy, his voice low and calm, like gravel sliding over stone. "I'm just charging this for a bit." The steadiness in his words wasn't defiance. It was an explanation, not begging, not justifying. But the manager didn't see the difference. To him, a rule broken was a rule broken, no matter the reason. "You can't do that here. I'll call the police." The words weren't loud, but final, as if it was the first time that day he felt in control. Red held his gaze, the same gaze that had peered through a scope for decades. Not cold, not eager, just a look accustomed to situations where arguing was pointless. Do what you feel you need to. It wasn't a statement. It was an acknowledgement. No resistance, no rebellion, but no submission either. He knew who he was, knew what mattered, what didn't. And if others couldn't see that, he had nothing left to prove. The manager stepped back, angry but slightly thrown off. He turned back inside. Red stayed put. The phone blinked slowly. 2%. That moment, between a quiet old man and a younger man asserting authority, was where the story began to veer off course. Neither fully grasped it then, but Red felt it. In his chest, something tightened. Not fear, not anger, just a faint instinct. The kind only those who've lived through war carry. A stillness before the storm. He didn't stand, didn't unplug the charger, just waited. And he knew, once the police were called, there was no stopping things from slipping away. 15 minutes later, the sound of a police siren cut through, not rushed, not warning. 2 officers stepped out of the car. Their walk, that of young men who still believed things were simple. They carried no aggression, just the confidence of those yet to be broken by the world. They approached Red, the old man still sitting there, unmoving, unchanging. His eyes showed neither panic nor defiance. They simply expected nothing. One officer, the taller one, stepped forward. He told Red to stand. His voice was even, not harsh, not kind. Red didn't stand, not because he refused, because he couldn't. In his hip was a metal rod, a relic from a bad jump in Bosnia, or maybe Colombia. He no longer recalled. He only knew that since then. Some movements no longer obeyed his will. The officer leaned down, his hand on Red's arm. It was a procedural touch. But to Red, any contact stirred unneeded memories. He shifted, slightly, shrugging the hand off like an unthinking reflex. No threat intended, just the survival instinct of a man who'd had to react before thinking too many times. The officer stepped back, called his partner. In less than 3 seconds, the other lunged in. Fast, strong, by the book. Red didn't react, didn't dodge, didn't fight back. His body hit the cold sidewalk, his face pressed against the rough concrete, like scattered pieces of memory. Handcuffs snapped onto his wrists. The metallic clink against bone rang like a small bell in his chest. No pain, just quiet. Those cuffs weren't new to him, but he'd never worn them like this. His old shirt was tugged askew, revealing his left arm. A faded tattoo emerged, a sharp trident with 4 horizontal lines on either side. No one looked closely. No one knew what it meant. To them, it was just old ink on wrinkled skin. He didn't speak, didn't resist. When they asked his name, he gave one at random, not to hide, but because his real name hadn't been called in years. They took him to the station in prolonged silence. Neither officer knew who he was, nor thought they needed to. To them, he was just an old man with no ID, no history, no threat. The fingerprint scanner kept erroring out. No ID matched, no record existed. In the temporary file, they labeled him the simplest name, John Doe, a man without identity, a shadow in a society too busy to pause, a mark in a system that didn't look closer. Red sat alone in a small cell, hands still cuffed. His wrists were starting to bruise, the thin skin no longer resilient. No one asked what he needed, no one asked if he was okay, and he didn't expect them to. He'd lived like this for years, on the margins, outside, beneath notice. Not because he didn't want to exist, but because he'd once existed so fiercely. The cost was to vanish afterward. His name, once called over radios, shouted amid gunfire, whispered as a plea, was now forgotten. He didn't blame anyone. It felt like a natural consequence. Those who truly lived in silence rarely left an echo. In his pocket, then, the old phone sat, its charge unfinished. The cable had been yanked mid-charge, the battery still low. A call unmade, someone waiting on the other end, perhaps now struggling with a breathing machine, wondering why he hadn't called back. Red wasn't worried for himself. He only felt a slight emptiness, not for being arrested, but for failing to keep a promise, even a small one. Between 2 men no one else remembered. Dear audience, take a moment to relax, grab a glass of water, and keep listening to this story, with surprises still to come. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone join us from all corners of the world. Comment 1 if you're loving this story, so we can keep bringing you more like it. The courtroom that morning was empty, as if everyone knew nothing memorable would happen. The public defender walked in, carrying an unopened file. The prosecutor didn't look up, just muttered familiar words, like reciting an old script. The judge flipped through Red's file, his face no different than if he were handling a parking violation. Red sat at the defendant's table, hands still cuffed in front, wrists red but silent, no wincing, no complaints. He sat still, as if used to being a foreign object in a place meant for justice. To everyone there, he was just a nameless old man. No papers, no past, nothing worth caring about. In the back row, Brandon sat upright, young, just into his 20s, but already grasping the difference between appearances and truth. A reservist, he'd heard stories others didn't share openly, from his grandfather, also a former SEAL, stories not found in textbooks, memories never pinned with medals. And now, something about how Red sat, a stillness not of surrender, but of someone who'd faced things fiercer than the law, kept Brandon's eyes fixed on him. Red shifted, a small movement, like someone adjusting their weight to ease pressure on a hip bone. His sleeve slipped slightly, revealing wrinkled skin, but still clear ink. Brandon squinted. Not a common tattoo, not a skull, not an eagle, certainly not a commercial design. It was a trident, sharp, faded by years, but still as cold as the day it was etched. Below it, a slanted inscription, Ranger Gulch. Brandon's heart skipped, not from fear, but from a hazy memory stirring, from stories his grandfather whispered over dinner, about a mission never named, about a soldier who never stood on a podium, but was called the last to leave by his team. Brandon stood, saying nothing to anyone. He stepped into the hallway, hands trembling slightly as he pulled his phone from his pocket. An old contact list appeared, and after a few rings, a familiar voice answered. His godfather, no longer in uniform, but still respected in tight circles of classified knowledge. Brandon said little. He didn't need to elaborate, just describe the tattoo, the man's eyes, the silence, the way he sat there, needing no one's understanding, nor proving anything. The other end went quiet for a moment. Then the voice dropped, no longer a friend's, but a grizzled soldier's, realizing something unbelievable. "You're sure about that inscription?" "Yes. Ranger Gulch, Trident, no mistake." A brief pause. "It might be Holloway." The name rang out, like an echo from another era. "Holloway? Keep him there. Don't let the case proceed. I'm sending someone now." The call ended. Brandon stood there, feeling as if he'd brushed against a thick layer of dust covering a piece of history no one dared reopen. He returned inside, his gaze no longer uncertain. This time, he saw Red not as a defendant, but as someone mentioned in the tales of survivors. Red still sat there, unaware of what was happening, not needing to know. He looked at no one, but the silence around him was no longer a wall. It was a space, one that someone who understood, had just stepped into. And in that moment, everything began to shift, not through action, but through a quiet truth, slowly emerging. From a tattoo time had nearly erased. At 9:47 a.m., the courtroom door opened. unannounced. A quiet but deliberate motion. Two men in uniform entered first, their steps measured, as if counting each one. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Behind them, a man strode in, tall, commanding. His uniform was crisp, 4 gleaming stars on his shoulders, unmistakable symbols. Admiral Thomas Vale, former commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command. Retired now, but his presence undiminished. He didn't glance around, didn't seek a seat. He walked straight to the defendant's table, where Red sat, still bowed, still unmoving. Each of Vale's steps silenced the room. The quiet spread, like ripples from an unseen epicenter. Even those who'd never served stood up. Instinctively. The young officer, the one who'd cuffed Red, shifted, faintly uneasy. The public defender looked up. The prosecutor froze. Lips parted. But no sound came. The judge. He took a moment to grasp what was happening. On Admiral Vale's chest, vibrant ribbons stood out, not for show, but as testaments to wars endured. Desert Storm, Somalia, Mosul, Kunar. Each campaign etched into the threads of his uniform. He brought no soldiers, only the authority of a man whose presence alone rewrote the rules of this small room. The judge spoke, his voice no longer steady. "Please state your name for the record." "Admiral Thomas Vale, United States Navy, retired," he replied, his voice low, clear, needing no volume to command. "I'm here on behalf of the defendant." No one stopped him as he took a few more steps toward Red. He paused, not too close, not too far, just close enough to hear and to see. He looked at Red, the man sitting there, still not looking up, not because he didn't recognize, but because he knew. Vale understood Red in a way that needed no confirming glance. He didn't need Red to stand. His presence there was enough. He turned to the judge, his voice unchanged, but each word carried the weight of precise rounds. "This man's name is Isaac Holloway, rank, Commander, 28 years in the Navy, SEAL Team 4, operations in Kosovo, Yemen, Colombia, Afghanistan, Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Joint Service Commendation, classified reports, and memories no one wants to carry." A breath caught in the room. Those place names weren't just map markers. They were shorthand for nightmares, losses only those who'd been there could grasp. Vale inhaled softly. He looked straight at the faces listening, then said slowly, "And today, he's in handcuffs, for sitting near an outlet." No one spoke. No one could. Suddenly, the cuffs on Red's wrists grew heavier in everyone's eyes, no longer tools of safety, but evidence of forgetfulness, of a system that couldn't tell a troublemaker from a man who'd kept it standing. Vale didn't raise his voice, didn't accuse. He didn't need to. The truth did that work alone. And in that moment, Red stayed silent. But his silence was no longer alone. It was filled by the presence of someone who'd stood beside him in moments no one else knew. For the first time, in a very long time, he was no longer invisible. After Admiral Vale spoke, the room sank into silence. No excuses remained. No reasoning could fill the quiet shame spreading through every breath in the room. The judge nodded, silently, as if he'd just been taught the true meaning of justice again. "All charges are dismissed. The record will be sealed," he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes fixed on the man still sitting quietly at the defendant's table. Red didn't stand right away. He didn't react. No nod. No bow. But the moment he rose from the old chair, the room shifted. Every eye followed his steps, not with curiosity, but with something close to gratitude. He picked up his jacket, folding it over his arm. He looked at no one. He didn't apologize. He didn't thank. Because men like him didn't live for thanks. They lived to protect what needed guarding, even when no one noticed. Vale stepped closer, quietly placing a challenge coin in his hand. A token only those who'd fought side by side would understand. The metal was cool in his palm, the back engraved with 4 words. Your silence built this nation. Red glanced at the coin briefly. No expression. But something in his shoulders eased. Not relief, but acknowledgement. That, at last. His quiet had been remembered by someone. He left the courtroom. His walk neither hurried nor slow, but steady. As sure as he'd stepped through hundreds of lands, needing no witnesses. That week, at the local Veterans Hall, a black and white photo was framed and hung by the bar. The image was blurry, showing a group of SEALs on a hillside, sunlight streaming from behind. Their faces were shadowed, only their weapons and stances clear. No names, just a scrawled note below. He never wanted to be known, but we remember. At the county courthouse, Brandon, the young man who'd made the most important call of his life, now read each file a little closer, no longer seeing a name as a code, no longer overlooking a tattoo. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, he glanced at the back row where someone else might be sitting, silent, waiting to be seen again. As for Red, he returned to his old house, kept fixing machines, kept living without noise. But from that day, people began nodding to him more. Some stopped their cars out front, leaving firewood, a pack of bread, or just a hesitant thank you. He didn't respond, but he accepted. For the first time in years, he let others see him. No one knew how many years he had left. But one thing everyone knew. The world had just been reminded that men like Isaac Holloway were still out there. They didn't ask for titles. They didn't tell stories. But they'd kept us standing, with sacrifices they never asked to be repaid. And maybe the last thing they needed was just a second glance. Did this story make you think? If you've ever known someone like Red, someone who lived, who gave, and never asked for anything, name them in the comments below. Share this story with your friends, your family, especially if they live in the United States, so we don't forget those quietly holding this country together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep following powerful stories like this one. And if you can, let us know. What city are you watching this from, and what time is it? We'd love to hear where this story reached your heart.